Okay, Planning and Zoning Commission, you are back live via Zoom and your cloud recording has begun. I will turn it over to the chair. I again apologize for the inconvenience.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. David, Mr. Gertz, I think where I lost you, and this might have been where I'm not sure if we all got lost at the same spot, but you were still going through your report and where you were at when we went out. I don't know if it was at the same time. Where were you when you went out? Do you remember? Or were you,
I got through my entire report and I looked up and you're all gone, so I'm not really sure.
So I think that
just to test who was paying attention.
yeah. So I think you're right towards the end of your report. I don't know if you want to start. I don't think it's necessarily that you start over, but I do think that it'd be important to maybe start over in the summary of wind energy conversion system permit, WCS permit requirements.
The summary.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that'd probably be appropriate. Start back right there.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, continuing on. So notice was provided as required. The roads that will be used primarily for this to access the site, specifically during construction and then during maintenance times, it would be from US Highway 287. From that, they will use Hermosa Road, Pumpkin Vine Road, Cherokee Park Road, Sportsman Lake Road, Boulder Ridge Road, which are all county roads. And they'll also be using Dell Creek Road, a private road, and an unnamed paved turnoff of US Highway 287. Interstate 80 will provide additional access to the north part of the project via Beatavoo Road and Monument Road. YDOT will be requiring a road use agreement, traffic control plan, and consultation and permitting for use or modification of their transportation system. As will the county. We are in the process of developing the road maintenance agreement with ConnectGen if this is approved. And the applicant provides detailed mapping of the hauled routes and traffic study for the project area. Access and utility licensing and permitting will need to be sought with YDOT and Albany County before using any of those roads. Long-term road maintenance agreement must be fully executed with Albany County prior to any commencement of work on in the project area. Interference, they've addressed that. They've notified microwave transmission emergency communication providers. They are buffering around lateral boundaries of Fresnel zone associated with microwave paths. There'll be further, they will mitigate any other interference that is anticipated with the project, and they'll respond to any complaints for those that are using local television broadcast or other communications. Emergency response plan has been provided, and it was routed to the applicants or by the applicant to other entities, fire district, and those folks, EMA, the Emergency Management Agency of the county. They provided a decommissioning plan and as well as reclamation plan. The color of these will be an off-white color, non-reflective, which is within the standards of the regulations. They'll post the required safety signing around the project areas where it's needed. And they're going to meet all the setback requirements. They've provided a waste management plan, certificate of liability, letters of consent from property owners. They've got all of them except for one of the property owners, William and Patricia Kilpatrick. And they are currently working with them and should have a signed agreement here within a couple weeks, from what I understand, and the applicant can give us a further update. That was the last update I had received. Findings necessary for approval. So they provided the required site plan. They're required to address public health, safety, and welfare of the community. We have to show that that won't be adversely affected. And they have to show that this will be within the public interest by not overburdening county services. They provided information on impacts, including economic and social impacts, air quality, water quality, general nuisances, soil disturbance, wildlife impacts, and cultural impacts in their application materials. They provided a number of reports and other information to substantiate what they are saying, and how they have addressed these things. The findings of fact, summary of the application, information review, summary of the wind energy conversion system permit requirements, and findings necessary for approval as listed in this report are incorporated as findings of fact. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with the Albany County zoning resolution. And staff, just my analysis. So the applicant has addressed all the associated impacts. They provided quite a bit of documentation through reports and professional studies that address these things. All required reports, plans, and other documentation have been provided except for that letter of consent. The letter that they did provide basically is from the attorney of the property owner that does say that they're working on, they're not really for the application or against it at this point until they see they're able to get that agreement in place, but that is supposed to be forthcoming and should be done prior to the Board of County Commissioners meeting, which we will obviously, once it gets there, if it's not done, then this application will need to, they'll have to postpone it before any decisions to get that taken care of. Staff's recommending approval of this application based on the incorporating the findings of fact and conclusions of law. I went over a lot of this stuff really quickly. I assume that some of this this information has been read and digested, and so if there's questions about any of those impacts that I kind of ran quickly through, I'd be happy to address those, or the applicant can address those. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to do my best to address those.
Thank you. At this point, do we have any comments or questions from the commission to Mr. Gertsch? Mr. Hinckley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a series of questions just procedurally, so we all kind of know where we stand. And some of these I've been discussing with David and Jennifer by email and so forth, but just so everybody can hear the answer. In your staff recommendations, you suggest we can approve, deny, or continue. But am I correct to understand that this has already been scheduled for a hearing before the county commission? So I'm just looking for what is our kind of decision space here. Can we continue this? I'm thinking not. What do you say, staff?
Okay, so yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can address that. You could continue it. The only caveat would be is that we would need to schedule a public or a special meeting prior to the being looked at by the Board of County Commissioners. Because on June 1st, that's when it's going to the Board of County Commissioners. It's been notified or noticed that way. And because of the way the statutes are written, it doesn't give us a whole lot of time as planning and zoning to really look at it. And, but if there were things that you really wanted to look at, we could schedule a meeting before that meeting and look at it again. So.
Okay, no, thank you. So when I read the staff recommendation and understanding the magnitude of this project and the public interest, and maybe I've spent too much time hanging with lawyers who get hung up on words, but I'm reading the words, and the staff recommendation is to approve adopting and incorporating the findings of fact, conclusions of law. So then I go up and I read, what are the findings of fact, conclusions of law? And there I read that they are everything in the previous report, explicitly including summary of application information, reviews, summary wind energy conversion system, permit requirements, findings necessary to for approval as listed in this report. So, and maybe this is a question for Ms. Curran as much as you, Mr. Gertsch. Am I understanding this correctly, that to take the staff recommendation, I'm now agreeing, and the applicant's agreeing to do all of these things? You just listed, for example, a big long, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, they're going to do this. Is that now, as I say, like, are we writing a contract here? Are they bound to do those things that you have described with the word will or shall by virtue of our approval? Is our approval contingent on all of those things implicitly?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Hinckley, and Jennifer may want to jump in on this, but yeah, anything in the application, this is, to me, this is a binding contract between the applicant and then the Board of County Commissioners if they approve it. So if they approve this, then we're saying, this is your application, we expect you to do all these things. And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
At least from my perspective.
Good answer. Okay. So then the follow-up is, I mean, I think the more wills and shalls, the better, as any of us, I think, would agree when we're writing a contract with someone, unless everybody know where they stand. And I'm not at all impugning Connect Gen in any way here. But I also read in the staff report and summary and findings of fact and so forth, an awful lot of things like requested by the state, by the county engineer, things that are recommended by Game and Fish, things have been addressed, it says, by the Conservation District. Similarly, there's a lot in the staff report about the plan has been provided, say emergency response, decommissioning, waste management, lighting, which I know is a key issue for many people, has been proposed. What do I make of all those? I mean, there might be true, but where's the teeth? I'm looking for, what does that mean when it says Game and Fish recommended this? Yeah, they did. So are they going to do it or aren't they? And where does it say they have to?
Right. So, okay, Mr. Chairman, like the county engineer's comments, what he's requiring is what is already basically required with the approval of the application. I think that's a good point. I guess with the reviews, I mean, if we need to make them stronger, maybe there's in your recommendation, you add, specific language out of those things to make sure that they're front and center, and that we know that these are the things that we want the applicant to do. And then the Board of County Commissioners can determine whether that, yes, indeed, we want those to be done. The rest of the staff report, yeah, I mean, we're looking at these summaries and some of these things, but the reviews, I can kind of understand that. I mean, with Game and Fish, we, as has been discussed, I discussed with you, Mr. Hinckley, Game and Fish, I mean, when it comes to wildlife and cultural resources, our regulations don't really have any teeth. I mean, they basically say that they don't have to address those. That's not part of the application if they go through industrial siting. And because they're going through industrial siting, we're basically saying industrial siting is going to take care of that, and they're going to make sure these things are done. But we don't know exactly what will happen with industrial siting. So, but other things, yeah. I mean, I think if there's reviews that come back and there's stuff that you want to make sure is front and center as part of the permit, then yeah, I would say add that as a condition of the permit. But.
Okay, because that was another important point, is we can approve this with additional conditions that we might come up with. Is that, if I'm understanding you correctly?
Yeah, I mean, they need to be based on the, what we're looking at, the impacts. If we find an impact that we're like, oh, well, they're not really, there's some other things we need to look at when it comes to interference or something. It's like, well, what about ham radio operators? There's those guys out there. Are we going to mess with their, interference or whatever? Maybe we want them to identify who those are and then talk to them or something. I mean, you you can add things to make sure that they're complying specifically with some of these regulations. Our regulations are general in a lot of ways, and so I think that's appropriate for this group to add conditions based on those impacts to make sure that they are being taken care of. So.
And we can get the applicant's view of some of these things, which I'll look forward to hearing as well. For example, with the light impacts, has been proposed, all right, can we make that, will implement lighting measures to turn them off if there's not an aircraft around. That's one that we can talk about later on, but there's a little example of something that I think many on this call would like to see required, not let's think about. So that would be an example. Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Gertz, is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Second question. Inspection and enforcement. I'm interested in your evaluation of the opportunity and ability and resources that we have to actually monitor and enforce any of this. The permit is full of shalls provisions, but who's going to check? Can you share with us what you think DEQ, Game and Fish, Industrial Siting, WAPA, what facilities, resources do they have by way of monitoring and enforcement, and what level of compliance monitoring and enforcement can the county provide?
So, I mean, I can't, Mr. Chair, I can't speak for any other agencies and how they'll be, making sure things are done. But from the county's perspective, the Planning and Zoning Commission not too long ago did make some changes to the regulations to require that inspections are done throughout the construction and implementation of the project. So there will be someone that is hired to make sure that they're meeting the regulations, they're meeting the things that are in the application. So that would be our enforcement mechanism. So this person that's hired to do that is required to provide us a monthly statement or report or whatever to tell us what is going on and how they're complying and or not complying, to make sure that we can kind of enforce that. So that was the solution that was brought up by the Planning and Zoning Commission not too long ago, maybe before Mr. Hinckley was on the commission. But yeah.
And I appreciate everyone's patience with people like Mara and myself who haven't been marinating in this like many of you have for so long. That inspector is to be hired by the company or by the county at the company's expense?
Mr. Chair, that will be hired by the company. That's how it's written in our regulations.
So, for example, we have a noise standard of 55 decibels at the property line. If it is found that that's being exceeded, then the county steps in and rattles their sabers, or how does that go?
Yeah, I mean, if they're not following the permit, then there's a process to enforce that we would go through to ensure that gets rectified.
And what is that process?
The enforcement process, well, that includes, we do some communication, obviously, with the company, and hopefully they would just take care of that and get that fixed. If not, then we give them a notice, a violation that says that you're not meeting these standards, and so if they're not rectified it's more of a formal notice. So we do an informal notice, say, hey, can we get this fixed? The next one's like, okay, well, you got this much time to get it fixed. And then if that doesn't work out, then the process is to take it to district court and to have it abated, or whatever they do, whatever the legal term is to get that fixed.
Okay, no, thank you. So this document we're looking at would go to court ultimately if that happened. And then a final thought, this kind of lets you off the hook. My reading agrees with yours that the county is preempted on wildlife and cultural resources. Also in the siting regulations, they specifically say that they preempt the county on financial assurance, reclamation, and decommissioning. Is that congruent with your understanding?
That is. Yep, that's how I understand as well.
Okay. So then can you tell us what those financial assurances are? Are they bonding this, or letters of credit or self-bonding like they do in coal country? Do you know, and maybe this is outside your purview?
I assume it's bonding, but I don't know for sure. I believe that's what other companies have done, but I don't know. We probably need to ask someone at Industrial Siding to really find out, I guess.
And this says the county will apply to be a party to those financial assurances. Has that happened? Have you applied to be?
We have not yet. We haven't had an application. This will be the first application where that rule is part of the regulations. So we will, during the industrial siding process, include that in our request from them to be a party on that. And then it's up to them whether they say, yeah, we'll let you be on there or not. So.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Mr. Hinckley, great questions. I think that Ms. Kern has her hand up. Ms. Kern, did you have something to add to the questions that Mr. Hinckley proposed there?
I did. I just wanted to add that with regard to the financial assurance question and the industrial siding question, that process is just starting, but we did send last week, we sent our letter on behalf of the county saying that we were an interested party, so that we have taken that first step on behalf of the county so that when it comes to the industrial siding hearings and things, the county can and will be heard there.
Thank you, Ms. Kern. Does that help out Mr. Hinckley for that question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hinckley, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, thank you. I'm good for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hanning, do you have any questions for staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have several questions because this is all new to me. I know you guys, as Mr. Hinckley said, have been marinating in this, but it's all new for me, and I have questions. Let me start with Mr. Gerch, and I think I'll probably have some questions for Ms. Curran at some point too. Well, one thing I noticed, the insurance certificate says it's supposed to, or the regs say it's supposed to be 5 million in the aggregate, and currently the insurance certificate seems to show 3 million in the aggregate. Do you know if that is going to be changed?
So the way that it was explained to me is, I'd have to look at it, but there's two different numbers on there. There's a 3,000 and there's a 2,000. If you add those two together, they come up with the 5,000 in the aggregate. But I don't have that. I can look at the document, but that was how it was explained to me by the applicant, because I asked that same question.
Okay, thanks for that one. You don't have to go searching through the many pages to find that one page. Thanks, though. Well, I guess there's something that I just am sort of wondering about. In the zoning resolution, the county is allowed to hire an outside engineer for towers. And in that case, it's for communication towers. But here we have towers with you. They're even more complex and even harder to sort out. Yet there's no wording that allows the county to hire their own expert to advise you. And you're left having to say in your staff analysis that reports and studies completed by licensed professionals appear to substantiate the information in the application. So it seems to me that the county is at a real disadvantage for knowing whether the information they're getting is done correctly. My experience in going to administrative hearings over mining sites is, the mine company brings their registered engineer and the government entity brings their registered engineer. And those two registered engineers have different ways of interpreting and making decisions about inputs to models, et cetera. And I just really feel like in this situation, the county doesn't have a neutral person to go to reconcile some of these differences that are being brought up. And I'm just wondering, is there any way to look at the tower requirements and say, this is a tower too, and ask that you should be able to hire your own engineer to look at all of this and render an opinion to you.
So these regulations, I mean, what we're looking at today is just the wind energy conversion system regulations. I mean, I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, the tower regulations are for communication towers, which these are not. You know, I understand what your point is, and you know, maybe that is something to look at in our future regulations, as you know, they continue to evolve. But at this point, yeah, it doesn't say that, and it's not that. We do have professionals that do review this application. We have a professional engineer that reviews it, you know. We have, you know, there's other agencies that have kind of those expertise on board. But I mean, point well taken, but I just don't think we can apply those regulations to these regulations, to this permit.
Okay, well, I understand. I thought it was a bit of a reach on my part, but I really do think the county is vulnerable here in not having advice. I guess if there are other experts available to weigh in on some of these controversies, especially over sound, you know, I guess that would help me feel better about the process, that you're getting independent input. And I guess this would be something to ask the applicant at some point, if they would voluntarily be willing to put that in the permit application, that they will indeed offer to hire an engineer at your discretion to look at some of these reports for the Board of Commissioners next. So
sure, I mean,
that's for the applicant to answer, whether they're willing to voluntarily do something like that. Okay, we'll move on from that, and I guess I still have some additional questions. You know, looking at whether this project is going to overburden county resources. I think of you guys as a county resource in that already this project has been probably overburdensome. And it's great that the company is going to hire somebody to do inspections and report to you. I would prefer if instead that person was hired through a memorandum of understanding to be paid for by the company and work for you, be selected by you and overseen by you. I think that would be preferable than asking the company to self-report, essentially. And also, I guess this will be another question for the applicant at some point. I'm concerned when you see all the things that are in motion, wildlife studies, all these sort of down payments on this project. I am wondering why they have not already gone forward to the FFA to try to get the aircraft detection system approved. That seems like a pretty big issue that's hanging out there that they haven't even started down the road that I know of on pursuing. And so a question for you, Mr. Gertsch, do the other wind projects in our county have the aircraft detection system in place?
So no, we only have one project that's been built in the county, and that was built prior to these regulations, and so it does not have the ADLS lighting on that. So
do you know if I've been homebound during COVID a lot. I haven't been to Cheyenne in quite a while. The last time I went through, it was nighttime driving with all the windmills blinking. And I have to admit, after a 9-hour drive, it got disorienting relative to taillights of semi-trucks. Do you know if those systems are on all the time, or if they have the aircraft detection system?
I do not. I don't know.
Okay.
So the newest one, I would say the newest one, the round table, I don't know what it's called, roundhouse, I think, project. If I'm understanding what the state has said previously correctly, they did come to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the state Industrial Siting Council folks, and they did say that all of the projects that are going through them, they are requiring that lighting. So I would just make the assumption that the roundhouse one has the ADLS system, but I can't tell you for sure. So.
Okay, I just didn't know if in FAA world, having tall towers on an already tall geographic feature like rule you out from getting this kind of lighting or something. I didn't have time to go look at FAA rules. I guess the last thing for now that I'd like to, well, actually, I guess I have a couple more things. In regard to setback for projects, I guess I'm not finding ice throw being fully discussed in the application. It comes up early on in the body of the report, you know, that ice throw is a concern for health and safety. And there really isn't much discussion about it. So when I went online to look up a little more about ice throw, it looks like typically the manufacturers recommend 1.5 times the height of the tower as your setback distance from things like I guess other people's property lines or transmission lines or roads, not the primary structure setback, but these other things that right now we have a 1.1 setback. And in looking at the ice throw issue, it turns out wind can have an effect on it as well. I came across a peer-reviewed scientific journal article where they modeled a 45-degree wind having an actual impact on moving an ice chunk farther during the ice throw event. And so I'm left with the feeling that our setbacks aren't adequately protective of ice throw based on the manufacturer's recommendation of 1.5. And I'm wondering then, in looking at the regulations on setback, when you get to paragraph J, you know, it's basically a provision that allows the Board of County Commissioners to modify setback distances at their discretion. And I'm wondering if you would consider that discretionary decision to be applicable to something like an ice throw setback.
You know, I mean, like you said, the regulations give the Board of County Commissioners some authority over setbacks. So, I mean, my review is just going to be based on what the rules say today. If the Board of County Commissioners wants to do something else, then obviously they can, and they can based on your recommendation as well. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's I guess what I'm looking for is ways that it's permissible to condition the permit in a recommendation. I guess my last question is probably for Ms. Curran regarding financial assurance. I'm fairly concerned about how the county has to give up all rights to control over what the financial assurance instrument is that will eventually be selected, and over time, which may change, right? They're allowed to update that, change the dollar amount over time. And just in my experience working in state government, I haven't found in another state, I haven't found financial assurance instruments to be very protective. I think we can all think of a lot of instances where self-bonding, self-credit has really backfired. That especially in the energy sector, you can be booming one day and not the next. And all of a sudden you're going bankrupt and leaving us all with towers that might not get decommissioned properly. So I'm wondering, is there a way to condition the permit? We can't be the ones to enter into the financial assurance, but is there any way that we could at least limit what options are on the table for industrial siting?
I can't answer that for you definitively because I have not been through an industrial siting hearing yet, and I am currently working on getting up to speed in that process. I've had a bunch of different meetings and things as I work through that. My gut is probably not. Industrial siting at the state level controls what they think is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And where we have the option to do things is with our unmitigated damages claims that go through industrial siting in the beginning, with our road maintenance agreement that we've been working on with ConnectGen, which has a bonding requirement in case something were to happen and they weren't to restore the roads to the condition that they were in before they started. All of those kinds of things. I mean, we can do some of those little things, but as far as limiting what industrial siting can do, I don't think that's something we're capable of.
Okay, a little planning commission overreach.
I understand the sentiment and where you're coming from, looking out for the county and what we're doing. And I'm sure we'd all like to have that ability at some time, but I don't know that it's something we can in actuality accomplish.
Thank you for your answers, both Mr. Gertsch and Ms. Curran. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Ms. Hanning. Appreciate it. Really well thought through, and thank you, Ms. Curran. Mr. Spiegelberg, do you have any questions for staff?
None.
You don't have any questions
No.
at this point? Okay, thank you. Mr. Kennedy?
None for staff. Thank you.
None for staff. And that's none for Mr. Kennedy. And at this point, none for myself or staff. And at this point, if the app. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Hinckley.
Yeah, just as a informal point of clarification, I spoke with the gentleman at industrial siting on the issue that Commissioner Hanning raised. So for what it's worth, he shares the thought that self-bonding is a joke, and he assured me that they will not be taking that direction. He was not clear on whether it will be a money in escrow or irrevocable letter of credit of something, but I did speak to the folks at industrial siting, and I was reassured that they were going to have an enforceable financial insurance instrument for what it's worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hinckley. Or the applicant's representative, if you want to address the commission, this would be your opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Amanda McDonald. Can everyone hear me all right?
We sure can, Amanda. Go right ahead.
Okay, great. I'm the project manager for the Rail Tywin project. I'm also joined with a few of my colleagues, just so you all know who's on the phone and available for questions. Joined by John Kuba, who's the Director of Environmental Affairs at ConnectGen, and Mark Lawler, who's the Vice President of Development at ConnectGen. And then we also have Amy Sherman and Kevin Fowler with Tetra Tech on the line. And Tetra Tech is the environmental consulting firm that supported the development of our county permit application. Just to introduce everyone in case any of them pipe up and you're not surprised by who they are. Yeah, I guess first off, just want to thank the planning department staff and members of this planning and zoning board for taking the time to review our application. We realize it's a hefty document and really appreciate all of your work on this. You know, I've been jotting down some points to respond to during the board's discussion, which I can start going through now, or if you'd prefer to ask me more specific questions at this point, just let me know what you prefer. Should I start kind of going through my notes, or would you rather direct me with specific questions?
I think at this point, it'd be good to just go through what you've got and what you want to address to us. And then what I'm going to do, Amanda, is give each and every member of the Planning and Zoning Board opportunity to ask you questions, or your team. And so if you would just give a background of what you had intended to say, and we will listen. And then I'm sure there will be questions that there will be.
Yep, sounds good to me. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, so a few updates based on items that were in the staff report. First off, I wanted to provide an update on the outstanding lease agreement with William and Patricia Kilpatrick. This is a private landowner that makes up about 5% of the project area. And as noted, we'll need to provide a proper letter of consent for this landowner prior to the county commission making their decision. And at this point, the lease agreement is fully negotiated and ready for execution. And we, fully prepare to have this lease agreement signed and provided to the county ahead of the June 1st county commission meeting. In fact, these landowners are planning to meet with their attorney tomorrow with the intention of doing a final review and signing the agreement. So that's the status of that lease agreement. Also wanted to speak to the comment letter from Wyoming Game and Fish Department that was provided to Mr. Gertsch in response to our application. So this comment letter recommends that ConnectGen avoid construction activities within a crucial winter range for mule deer between November 15th and April 30th. And out of our planned 120 turbine locations, about 5 of these locations do overlap with this winter range. And we have fully committed to this recommendation. We stated it in our application and want to make sure the board is aware of that we will be avoiding construction in that area during the months recommended by Game and Fish. In that letter, Game and Fish also recommended that we establish a monitoring plan and a technical advisory committee. This is something that we've been coordinating with Game and Fish on, and our recent application to the Wyoming Industrial Siting Council included a draft of the monitoring plan. And as some background for this board, the technical advisory committee will be composed of ConnectGen, Game and Fish, and any of our project landowners who are interested, and they will meet annually during project operations to review post-construction wildlife monitoring data and reclamation success and determine if additional monitoring or management is needed. Just wanted to provide the board with some more background there on that letter from Game and Fish, and assure you all that we are committed to following their recommendations there. Just some notes that I jotted down while you all were discussing. One was about ice throw. So in our experience, we've seen, conflicting recommendations from turbine manufacturers. For example, I have a document here from the past couple of years that recommends 1.1 times turbine height for setback for ice throw, which is consistent with the county's regulations. My understanding is that the 1.5 times turbine height ice throw distance is worst case scenario when there is not mitigation. And modern wind turbines do have the ability to detect when there's ice buildup and curtail in those situations, which dramatically minimizes the risk of ice throw. So just wanted to make sure that it's clear that that 1.5 times ice throw distance is worst case scenario if that curtailment technology was not available, which with modern turbines, it is. The question about decommissioning, the financial assurance that is required. I think Mr. Hinckley already touched on this, but the ISC administrator has made clear to us that, self-bonding is not appropriate for this. They've certainly been burned in the past by other types of energy development that have self-bonded and then gone bankrupt. So the ISC staff, understand those pitfalls and will review our financial assurance to make sure that it will remain in place regardless of who the project owner is or if the project owner goes bankrupt. See what else I had. One of the board members brought up the FAA aircraft detection system lighting. So this is something that, as of the March 2nd, 2021 updates to the county's wind regulations, it is required that the applicant apply to the Federal Aviation Administration to use aircraft detection lighting system technology. The question for why have we not done this yet? Generally there's sort of an order of operations with wind development, and typically this FAA approval comes close to before construction. Once we have the final specific coordinates for every single turbine location, which will be determined during final engineering. I can say that we have been working with the vendor for this ADLS technology over the past year to model the coverage of the radar system will provide for the project area. And so we feel very confident that when the FAA does perform their review, they will find that the technology appropriately provides coverage for the project area and will be appropriate for the project. And then I think the only other thing I had wanted to touch on was the question of the applicant committing to funding an independent engineer for the county. And this is something we're open to discussing, but would need a little bit more detail on what specifically this board had in mind and what would be reviewed. So sorry for the rambling, but I'm happy to expand on any of that or take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. What I'm going to do now is go through the commission here, and if you would answer the best of your knowledge or your response to their questions. Mr. Hinckley, do you have any questions for Mrs. McDonald?
I do. I don't need to keep going first if someone else wants to jump in here. So what's your pleasure?
It doesn't bother me. You just always come up first on my screen. So I apologize.
I suspect Aaron Applehunt's our sheriff. He always gets to the front of the line too.
That's right.
Okay. Yes. First of all, I want to thank Amanda and her whole crew. Whether you're good, bad, or indifferent about the project, they've been splendidly responsive, above and beyond the call of duty for individual commissioners like myself. So thank you, Amanda. I'm happy to do that publicly. You've been great helping us get up to speed on this. I have three specific things, but just as a general one, do you, Jen, agree with what you heard from Mr. Gertz and Ms. Curran about you're bound by this report, and is there anything in there that causes you nervousness? Are you feeling bound?
I am. Yes, we definitely the application as a contract of sorts. And if we've stated we're going to do it in our application and the county approves a permit, that's binding. So hearing Mr. Gertz say that did not give me any sort of, pause or heartburn. I, fully expect that.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about fire. That's been expressed by a lot of folks, and apparently there was some incident in Laramie County with which I'm not familiar that caught a lot of people's attention. Your application, I was reassured to read, says turbine fires are not part of normal operations. That's good to hear. With a smile. To be fair, it also says that turbine fires are rare. In the application, it says, in the event of a fire, sensors within the wind turbine nacelle would detect interior fires and immediately shut down machinery. If a turbine fire were to occur, the objective for fire control would be to contain any potential ground fires that could result from falling debris. ConnectGen would not attempt to control a fire at the source if it is up tower. So basically, the applications addressed to fire issues is put anything out that you see on the ground and call the fire department. And there's a recitation of the local fire response capabilities running through various of your applications. But I'm wondering, for you or your technical support, are there options for more aggressive address to the concern about fire rather than shutting down the turbine? Are there ways to have some automatic suppression technology available, like flooding the nacelle with fire suppressant or something?
Sure. So our planned strategy for dealing with turbine fires, which is, to allow the turbine to burn itself out and fighting fire at the ground level. I realize that doesn't sound very glamorous, but that is the standard process for fighting these fires. Turbines at a 1,000 meter hub height are, it's very challenging to fight a fire at that level. So the emphasis is on, containing that fire to that turbine and preventing it from spreading. And with the fire you mentioned over near Cheyenne that occurred several months ago, that was the exact strategy they used, where, the wind project operations staff and the local fire response team were on site surrounding the turbine, containing fires from any debris that fell. And after a couple hours, the turbine fire burned itself out.
And
so I realize that, it does not sound like the most high-tech solution, but that is, when these fires do on rare occurrence happen, that's the procedure for fighting those fires.
And are there technologies available? Have other people tried to, as I say, have automatic onboard fire suppression in the unit itself? Is that something that folks do?
I am not incredibly familiar with it, so won't be able to provide a ton of information there, but I am familiar with the concept of turbine fire suppression. It's not used very often for whatever reason. Our VP of construction has been working on wind projects for 20 years, and he has personally never worked on a project that's used this type of system. I'm not sure. I can't speak to how effective it is or, what scale of fires it's able to put out, but I do know there is some technology that exists, but unfortunately cannot speak to it in great detail.
And any of your crew there have any familiarity with such technologies? I guess hearing nothing.
I guess
yeah,
Mark or John, if either of
you. Sorry, this is John Kuba. Maybe just to weigh in here. We as developers, we have projects across the country, and on another project, we are exploring fire suppression technology. That the reason we're exploring it in that specific situation is it's a project located in a forested area in Northern California where fire risk is much higher, and then if a fire were to occur, it's much more difficult to fight a fire on the ground in a forested environment. So in that specific situation, our fire strategy is digging and looking a lot harder at that technology, whether or not it's appropriate for the project. In this situation, as Amanda has mentioned, the standard in a rangeland environment is to fight the fire from the ground, and we will have very good access with the access proposed for this project, along with the implementation of the emergency response plan. We feel that's an appropriate strategy for addressing the fire risk.
And some of the towers are actually in or adjacent to the forest. I'm thinking of the Boulder Ridge, where all us Laramie folks, we went to thought of any fires up there. Am I understanding that incorrectly? Don't we have some of these towers that are adjacent to forested areas?
Yes, that's correct. I guess the difference with our California project is that project is literally within a forest. And this rail tie project is certainly adjacent to forested land. So yeah, certainly, this discussion makes sense to talk about fire safety with this project.
The second one was when you've touched on the lights, and just as a Wyoming traveler, I'll echo what Ms. Henning said, and I bet everybody on this call, you drive through Shirley Basin and it is just, you're assaulted by this fireworks that goes on incessantly, and that is as close to being intolerable as anything that's here. And the applications are full of, we're going to apply, and to the extent FAA will approve. In other places, it says we will install ADLS. How comfortable are you with that will occur in terms of making it an explicit condition of a permit? And then I think it might be helpful for all of us to explain how that works. Does that mean we turn them off or on for 5-minute intervals or an hour? Can you just help us understand what the lighting situation would be under these ADLS technologies?
Sure. So the way the technology works is it uses a radar-based system to track air traffic in the area. And there's a kind of artificial perimeter that it establishes around the project where when an aircraft flies into that perimeter, the lighting must turn on. So since the lights would only be on when the plane is in the project area, it would be, a relatively short duration. The frequency with which the light turns on will depend on the project location and the amount of air traffic. But the statistics we've gotten from the providers of this ADLS technology is that typically the lights will be off 80 to 90% of the evening when this technology is implemented.
And do you have a feel for what the air traffic is over your site?
That's not something that we've specifically studied at this point.
Okay. And so then back to the question of if in some places one could argue that that is a permit condition, it's kind of iffy. In others, what would be your reaction to that being an explicit permit? Are you confident that that can be done?
I would not be comfortable with that being a permit condition because the ultimate authority is with the Federal Aviation Administration. And this is something that actually was discussed pretty extensively when Planning and Zoning was updating their regulations last fall on, at what point does the county's authority end and the FAA begins. So that's, other members of the Planning and Zoning can supplement my answer here, but the ultimate decision that was made was that the county would require the wind project applicant to apply to the FAA for the use of ADLS technology, but ultimately the FAA has the authority on whether that technology is acceptable or not.
But you're committed to aggressively pursuing that option.
Yes, we realize this is a concern that's been brought up by a lot of surrounding landowners, and certainly it would make our lives as developers a lot easier if we can say that this technology will be used at this project.
Okay. And the third thing was something that you and I have had some correspondence on, shadow flicker. Can you share with us your ability to turn your turbines on and off? I mean, you're not going to stop a 250-foot long blade in a heartbeat, but is the technology such that one can say, I've read about a flock of birds shows up and then the turbines can be demobilized as they pass through. And I'm wondering if that's an option that's available to limit shadow flicker.
Yes, the turbines can be curtailed individually with, very quick response times, less than a minute from, full operations to standstill. As you mentioned, that's a technology that's used for mitigating impacts to avian populations. I am familiar with shadow flicker curtailment being used on projects where there is excessive shadow flicker on neighboring properties. For rail tie, we've modeled the shadow flicker and found that, it's well below the recommended threshold of 30 hours per year on neighboring properties. So based on that, we're not considering any sort of shadow flicker curtailment for this project.
If we could just talk about that for a second, 30 hours per year doesn't seem like very much, but that would be, if that all happened, say, at 30 minutes a day, I think many folks would find that objectionable. So in pursuit of that thought, just to share with the others, I've asked ConnectGen to go back to their modelers and tell us not just what the number of hours per year of shadow flicker would be, but how intense are those? I mean, just thinking about it, they're all going to be piled up in certain periods of time. And again, to their credit, they came back with the answer quite quickly. The longest duration of a shadow flicker event to one of the identified receptors was 28 minutes. So my off the hand suggestion of 30 minutes was kind of a lot, was about on the money. Now, what we want to do with that is a discussion for later on. But am I explaining that correctly, Amanda?
Yes, you are. That 28 minutes, duration was for the neighboring property that has the highest amount of shadow flicker out of all the properties, and out of the full calendar year, the longest duration it would be 28 minutes. The average duration would be 15 minutes. And when I say average, that's, out of the days that do have shadow flicker. The majority of the days would not experience any shadow flicker. And I also do want to caveat that the analysis that produced those numbers was very conservative in that it assumes, one, that it's sunny all the time, two, that the wind is always blowing and the wind turbines are operating at, full capacity, and three, the turbines rotor is facing the receptor in a way that shadow flicker will occur. So those numbers do represent a worst case scenario.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's all I had for the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the ConnectGen folks.
Thank you, Mr. Hinckley. Ms. Hanning, do you have any questions for Ms. McDonald and her team?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. McDonald, for addressing some of the concerns that I brought up earlier. I feel like I've had my answer about the FAA aspect of things. I'm heartened to hear that everybody agrees the financial assurance has to be robust. I guess I just want to talk a little bit more about ice throw, because I'm also reading that even with a turbine in the brake mode, that there can still be ice buildup and ice falling off. So it doesn't totally stop the problem. But I guess I'm wondering, so the permit application says you're going to follow manufacturer requirements, and I don't know what you have 3 different potential turbines that you're looking at. I know that GE has a published requirement of 1.5 times the tower height. I don't know what Vespa's saying, but it's interesting to me that the road, or the 287, is protected by a 1/4 mile of interference, and I'm just wondering how significant would it affect your site plan if some turbines had to be moved back an additional, let's see, I guess if you do the 1.1, it's a 650 feet distance. If you do a 1.5, it's a 886 foot difference. Would that pose significant problems for the project to move a couple hundred more feet?
Can you clarify, would that be setback from?
I guess I'm looking at all the 1.1 setbacks. I'm looking at all the 1.1s and wondering if they should really be 1.5.
Yeah, so I guess your point, so I have I'd be curious to know the date on the document you have from GE that mentions the 1.5 turbine setback. I don't know if you have that readily available.
No, it's just a quick Google search and I see it showing up in a lot of different places. So I was starting to think it was an industry standard.
Yeah, I have a document from GE from 2018 that has the setback listed as 1.1. So that's why I was curious on the date. I mean, it's hard to say here, you know, if changing the setbacks now would impact our project. You know, that would be a mapping exercise for our GIS team, but, you know, we have followed the county setbacks. You know, generally in working with counties, they don't change the setbacks in the 11th hour. You know, so that would absolutely pose a challenge for us if the setbacks were to be changed from what is in the regulations, which we have been designing our project under for the past, you know, 2+ years.
Right. No, I understand, and I'm not meaning to create a sudden setback over setbacks. But I am seriously wanting to make sure that the ice throw issue is reasonably addressed, so there aren't big chunks of ice flying onto people's property. And right now, I guess, without knowing what the manufacturer recommendation is specific to the 3 different turbine types you're looking at, I guess it's hard to decide.
Yep, and to clarify, our permit application refers to 1 turbine type, the Vestas 150 4.2 turbine. And also you mentioned earlier that, you know, ice drop can occur even when the turbines are stationary. And to be clear, you know, that would be the ice falling from the blade directly vertically down underneath the turbine. That would not be, so that would be different than ice throw.
Right. No, you're right. You're not getting the element of the throw going and,
right.
And I understand that in a lot of these cases, the ice drops quite close to the turbine. And I'm really just talking about worst case scenarios. And wanting to make sure that we're appropriately protective.
Yes, absolutely. No, and understand the safety concern there.
Well, thanks for answering all the questions. I don't have anything else right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hanning. Mr. Spielberg, do you have any member of her team?
Of who?
Of Ms. McDonald at Connect Gen and her team?
Well, I think that they are experts in the field, and this isn't their first rodeo building these turbines. And these turbines they keep improving and improving and improving the safety of them. And I might add, a few years back, there was an issue up there around Arlington, and the new flashers are activated by aircraft now. They're not on all the time. They're activated by aircraft. These people know what they're doing building these things, and they have to comply with every regulation in the book. And I think that it should be left up to the experts.
Thank you, John. Mr. Kennedy, do you have any questions or for Ms. McDonald and her team?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And at this point, I don't have any questions as well for Ms. McDonald. Thank you for giving your report and fielding the questions, Ms. McDonald. At this point now, we're going to open this up to public comment. And so before we get into public comment, how this is going to kind of work is, and I see people have their hands up and everybody's going to be able to speak. And again, if we could try to keep our points around 3 minutes, right at 3 minutes, and I'll be running the clock. Just so that we can get everybody through and hear everybody's comments. And I'll start this right now. The first hand I see up is an RJ Fetch. Fetch, am I saying that correct, sir?
Fetch, Fetch, yes.
Okay.
Fetch.
The floor is yours, sir.
I'm RJ Fetch from 3320 Rawhide Drive, LaPorte, Colorado. My wife and I own a 35-acre parcel in Poudre River Ranch at milepost 21 of north of 81C. I have 3 questions and a comment. I don't know, are you only opening the floor to comments at this point or questions?
You could certainly pose questions. Comments are more effective. Your questions, we're writing down questions and we will address questions once we're done with the public comment period.
Oh, so questions are later then?
No, go ahead and ask your questions. You're probably not going to get a direct response at this point, but we're going to take those questions down and we will get back to you on those.
Okay.
But at this point, we're trying to make comments and you can certainly ask those questions and we will try to get them the best we can answered for you.
Okay, my first question is, how will this construction of the 120 wind turbines affect our cell coverage, which comes from a tower up by tie siding?
What's your next question, sir?
One of the many wonderful things we love about our 35 acres is the ability to see the Milky Way with millions of stars in the dark of the moon. What will be done with these 120 wind turbine towers to reduce light pollution in the night skies so we can continue to see the Milky Way with its millions of stars?
All right, your next question.
What impacts will there be from the 120 wind turbines have on killing migratory birds like Canadian geese, eagles, other birds, and archaeological sites?
Those are your 3 questions.
Yes, sir.
And any comments that you have?
Yes. We are in favor. Basically, I'd like to know what the answers to those questions are, but my upfront view right now is we are in favor of constructing 120 wind turbines, assuming that these other concerns are taken care of. From what we know about the project, it looks like a good way to convert Wyoming wind into energy for the benefit of the people in Wyoming. And I appreciate Commissioner Hanning's baby water bath metaphor, and I'm reminded of the story of the Iroquois tribes who met periodically. When they met at the beginning of their conference, they opened their meeting with a prayer to the Great Spirit that any decision they made be made on the effects of the decision to the 8th generation. When I look ahead at our 8th generation great-grandchildren, I firmly believe that we and they will be better off if we decrease our reliance on fossil fuels and increase our reliance on renewable energy like wind and solar. So we are in favor of constructing 120 wind turbines with no new transmission lines and with underground cables between turbines.
Thank you, sir. And we'll get back to you on those questions. We'll get those answered, okay? So stay on. Next hand up I see is a Luke Hawkins. Luke, you got 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to actually try to hopefully answer one of Chairman Hinckley's questions. Again, this is Luke Hawkins, Albany County Fire District 1 Chairman. In terms of fire suppression, that's more of our expertise. NFPA standard 850 kind of addresses some of your concerns for fire suppression. There are certain things that my understanding is from Amanda is that some of those things have already been taken care of through the standard. It's just modern technology and practices. Some of the other things that you may want to look up, again, would be in NFPA 850 in terms of internal fire suppression for those wind turbines. That's about all I have, unless anybody has any questions for us.
Not at this point, Mr. Hawkins, thank you so much. Lawrence Schrumpf.
Day. So I'm really excited about the wind farms coming to Albany County. As coal becomes less profitable, we need the wind farms to create jobs and revenues to help support our education system in our state. With the recent proposed legislative cuts, over 1,000 direct jobs are going to be cut in Wyoming and 4,000 indirect jobs. So these wind farms will help bring some of those jobs and teachers back to Wyoming. Like many, I would rather have energy and revenue production that I can see than the ones I don't see and yet poison our water and air. I understand about half of the electricity we produce in Wyoming through coal and natural gas is sold outside of Wyoming. So it is very logical and understanding that any new energy production, the majority of it will be sold out of state. And that's why we're called an energy state. We produce it to sell to other states. As I understand, the rail tie wind project will be subject to the exact same taxes and regulations as all other wind projects in the state and or the county, and the size and offsets will be the same. And I understand that up by Medicine Bow, Rock River, that there has been an approved wind farm that's currently, in development. And I just can't see that we would impose new regulations or restrictions on the rail tie wind project that we didn't impose on the other ones in Albany County. Doesn't seem fair or legal. And was at the Lucky Star and Two Rivers wind project. But anyhow, this is just, going to bring so many jobs and so much money and opportunities into Laramie. And so I just want to say thank you to the businesses and the people that are making this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Minear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you see me?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead, sir. You have 3
Very
minutes.
good. I want to talk about some of the details we've been going over recently. I think it's a very helpful turn in the conversation rather than just taking a poll of who's for and who's against. Let's start with the ADLS systems. One of my concerns is when you look at the application, what it says is that ConnectGen will confer with the FDA, the FFA, about the feasibility of such a system. Now, if you're writing a contract, you don't want to have somebody just confer, particularly if ConnectGen assigns this permit to somebody else who doesn't want to spend the money to do it. Second thing I would say is, if you look at, I think even on the same page of the staff comments, they say that ConnectGen's agreed to adhere to all the local and the state standards for blasting. I was there this last fall, Mr. Chairman, and you were too, when without the comment of the public, you ignored my written comments to suggest that we needed blasting regulations for these projects. You completely ignored it. So to say that you're going to adhere to regulations that don't exist seems at best cynical and at worst misleading. There are some other things that concern me. One is ice throw. I've been writing about this ever since I started appearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission. My view about this is, let's just go practically at it. There really are only 10 turbines that are affected by an ice throw standard that's applied to county roads. And if you were to look at a map, if you get to look at page 3 of the site plan for ConnectGen, you'll see that 3 of those are immediately to the east and adjacent to Cherokee Park Road. There's nothing behind them. It wouldn't kill these folks to set those turbines back far enough to be safe. And I don't necessarily agree with the 1.5 standard. That's what the manufacturers say. I begin with the thought that nobody ever said that the 1.1 number that we use in this county came from anywhere in particular. There's nothing that says 1.1 times turbine height for ice throw. It's merely 1.1. I submit to you that the county that's thought about that which is our next door neighbor in Laramie County, uses something called the Seifert equation, which is documented at some length in my letters to you, is 1.5 times rotor diameter plus nacelle height. So it's back a little further. Still not twice what the 1.1 standard would do, but further back. And I think over the long haul, it's going to be much easier for the county to deal with turbines that were obliged to be set back a little further than turbines that were too close. I would also say that this has often been portrayed as the kind of thing that unnecessarily burdens the project with costs. And I would say to you, if this $500 million project is going to be busted by moving those turbines back a few hundred more feet, then I'd like to see the economics that show that. Another thing I'd say is with regard to fire. So the plan is to simply have those things burn while firefighters stand underneath them, several hundred feet below, and hope that they can contain them. One of the few things that the wildfire papers and the current draft environmental statements points out, in the type of area we're in, fire spreads more rapidly. Now think about that for a minute, because you're going to have a 26,000 acre project that probably the number of personnel on can't drive across in the time to get that a fire gets going. You're going to have the volunteer fire departments from up on the hill, and I know it doesn't happen instantly that you get off Boulder Ridge Road. You're going to have them over near Ames Monument. You're going to have them in Laramie. That fire can be off and running in a heartbeat. Now, I'm not saying that the answer is always to have suppression in these turbines, but it seems to me it's something you ought to consider, partly because of the situation.
Mr. Meyer, your time's up. Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for the 3 minutes.
It was 5 minutes. I'll let you go.
All right, thanks for 5 minutes.
Very kind of me to give you 2 extra minutes.
You're right. It was kind of.
Mr. Bundy, you're up next.
I think.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Mr. Bundy?
Hello?
Dennis Bundy.
Yes, this is Mr. Bundy. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Go right ahead.
Yes, thanks for letting me comment, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dennis Bundy. I'm at 25 Warden Trail, and I use Cherokee Park Road and Boulder Ridge Road to access my 35-acre place. I've been up there about 21 years, and I'm opposed to this project. I am worried about traffic on this Cherokee Park Road that's about 3.5 miles to the turn off the Boulder Ridge Road. And what I was reading in the reports, about 170 construction vehicles a day accessing these roads would put, my safety and other people that use that road at issue. We do see a lot of campers and fifth wheels that are pulled into the Roosevelt National Forest that use that road too. So I'm very concerned about that. I am concerned about 600-foot towers. Where my home is located on Warden Trail, I can actually see Arlington with the red strobe lights flashing all night out my north windows. So somebody had mentioned that they shut off, come on only during the aircraft. That's not true. I can actually see them all night from the cabin. As far as wildlife, I didn't see anything about the impact of the moose in that area. I did read about 12 golden eagle nests that are located within 1 mile of the turbine. So very concerned about the wildlife impact of that whole area up there. And I did hear talking about aircraft. And over the 21 years, we've actually had the Wyoming Air National Guard that does low-level flights over that Boulder Ridge area at treetop level. So I'm not sure if anybody has talked to the Wyoming Air National Guard about these towers being 600 feet tall or not, but those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Bundy. Appreciate your comments. The next hand up I see is IR. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, did you say Arundhati Nair?
You know what? That is right. Thank you for correcting me. I apologize for messing up. Go right ahead.
That's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure. So
I'll
thank
give
you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll give you 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much. My name is Aru Nair. I'm currently a freshman in college and I've lived in Laramie all my life. I wanted to comment a little bit about like the bigger picture of what we're working towards here with this project. So more and more, we've been seeing the effects of climate change and limited revenue streams, not just on the economy, but more importantly on the Wyoming people. And as a young Wyomingite myself, I think I can speak for us when we say that we want to live in a state that not only listens to science, but will also that one that will also face these problems head on. And that means pursuing projects like the Rail Tie Wind project and working with companies like ConnectGen. We, as young Wyomingians, want to live in a Wyoming. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
We can. Hold on one second. Let's see. I'm trying to mute Mr. Bundy here. Mr. Bundy, he's muted. Go right ahead.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, we want to live in a Wyoming that will continue to have opportunities for its youth, and one that will choose to be proactive instead of reactive. And part of being proactive is taking initiative on projects like this one, which would lead us to a more promising future for Wyoming. And I, for one, am very much hoping that my state and my county will be able to be part of that. And we want to see Albany County and Wyoming grow and have a diversified economy, and seeing undertakings like the Rail Tie Wind project is so incredibly encouraging, because when we see more and more wind turbines cropping up around the state, I always see it as a beacon of hope, hope that our elected representatives and officials are taking our concerns seriously, and that they are making the right decisions to ensure all of us having a better future for our state, country, and people. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you choose to recommend granting the permit for this project.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate that. And before we go on to the next speaker, if people would just remember to, when they're speaking, of course unmute it, but when you're done speaking, please mute your microphone, because it is very annoying when somebody's trying to speak and we can hear somebody else. So we're gonna move forward here. Tracy Kupek. Did I say that correctly? Tracy Kupek?
You did.
Okay.
Yes, you did.
Ahead. Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Moore, Commissioners, and Mr. Gertsch. I'd just like to say up front that I do oppose this project. But I have to agree with Commissioner Hinckley and Commissioner Haney that the accountability for the ConnectGen to have an independent auditor, or the person that you're going to hire to enforce and provide the monthly reports, I totally agree that that needs to be independent from the company. I do agree with the Technical Advisory Committee with the Wyoming Game and Fish, that they do involve the landowners as part of that committee. That's very important. I do see that that is a conflict of interest if you do have the company hire that and not have an independent auditor on that. I have to address that I live at 23 Harvard Road in Beaufort, Wyoming, but you access my property through the Monument Road access. And I can see coming home to my place the Laramie County wind turbines, and those lights do continually blink. And I think from the top, I live down by the creek, but if you do go up on the top of my driveway, you will see, I do see the Harriman turbines, but I will also see the ConnectGen turbines as well. And that the next area of concern of mine is the fire suppression. We have volunteer fire departments up here in this area, and through the watersheds that I look on the map and I see these turbines where they're going to be located. Through the watersheds, there is forest acreage there. And my concern is if these do, if there is problems and they do have fire and they do catch on fire, that our volunteer firemen, and I do appreciate Mr. Hawkins, and I have total respect for Albany County Fire District, but the local the volunteer fire departments up here would probably not be able to get to those before the wind up here. We do have a lot of wind, but that will also cause a lot of fire as well. So I do live up here. I do have a direct interest in this. As you can see, I do live in a log cabin. The fire does really concern us as far as that type of risk. I wrote down several notes here. I did read this.
Ms.
Yes.
Kupek, thank you for your comments, and we do have you at 3 minutes, so we really do
Okay.
appreciate you commenting, and thank you for your, we do appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Connor Mullen.
All right.
You ought to listen to some of these, Lou.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Can you hear me all right?
We sure can.
All right. Yep. My name's Connor Mullen. I'm here with Sierra Club Wyoming. I live at 565 North 4th Street here in Laramie. And on behalf of our staff and Sierra Club Wyoming's nearly 6,000 members and supporters, I'm expressing our support for the Rail Tie Wind Project's permit application. We would like to encourage the Planning and Zoning Commission to recommend that the County Commissioners approve the application. After reviewing the draft EIS, or the Environmental Impact Statement, we've concluded that the benefits of developing the Rail Tie Wind Project outweigh the relatively limited impacts from the project on an area that has already seen a fair amount of development. That's all for me tonight. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Ms. Reva Epler.
Hello, my name is Reba Epler, and I support the Rail Tie Wind Project and the recommendation of the planners and zoners onto the county commissioners. My mom and my aunt own a ranch that's part of this project, the Bath Sisters Ranch. And this project will be a tremendous benefit in allowing my family's ranch to remain in ranching. The benefits of this project are that the ranch will continue to be used agriculturally. There's a lot of water on the ranch. The ranch is the headwaters of the Dale Creek and Pump Creek. And there's a tremendous amount of water that runs through those. And I would really hate to see my family's ranches be subdivided because of the impact that subdivisions have on those beautiful water resources. And I would like to point out that the county plan supports this type of development. It says that they want to create new opportunities for diversifying the agricultural economy by establishing new compatible uses such as alternative energy development, and this falls within that comprehensive plan at page 46. Ranch land fragmentation is identified as one of the top 4 threats to the future integrity of the West public lands, and that's from the Wyoming Stock Growers Land Trust. Ag land is at the greatest risk for residential development. The majority of land going into low-density rural development is coming from the sale of prime farm and ranch land to residential and commercial developers. That's again from the Wyoming Stock Growers Land Trust. Wyoming ranches provide important wildlife habitat, cradle the headwaters of our rivers, and help nurture a distinctly Western way of life. Wyoming Stock Growers Land Trust. And I believe that this project is in the best interest of the county in general. Therefore, I encourage you to recommend it for the passage for the county commissioners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Epler. Mr. Mike Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Massey. I'm at 1209 W Hill Road, and I'm speaking in favor of the proposal and urge the commission to recommend approval to the county commissioners. A great deal has already been spoken about the benefits. One thing which I would add is that historically, at least with regard to the energy economy that we are leaving, Albany County was left behind. We didn't have the coal, we didn't have the oil and gas, and for decades, Albany County has struggled with being the lowest per capita revenue generator in the state of Wyoming, and it has led to some grim times. So it's nice to be out in the front of perhaps what the energy economy is going to be looking like in the future. I've read the entire document. I'm impressed with the information that was provided. I agree with most of the conclusions, especially with regard to turbine safety and control, road building and traffic safety, ice throws, noise, shadow flickers, wildlife, including birds and bats, wetlands, fire risk, evening lights, electric and magnetic fields, and a host of other things. And you could tell from the introduction from your staff, just all the conditions and all of the resources that have to be considered for a project like this. But we're not inventing the wheel. As one of the commissioners had mentioned before, there are lots of experience, a great deal, a long track record in Wyoming already with regard to these wind fields. And I think that we can certainly rely upon those experiences and perhaps have a little bit of trust rather than trying to ratchet everything down to the nth degree. Because one of the parts of the application, which I did appreciate a great deal, was the notion of flexibility. And I think that that's going to be in everyone's best interest to make sure that that flexibility is going to be there going forward. And the final thing which I'll mention is I think Commissioner Kennedy had mentioned it on an earlier application you were looking at, and that is decisions need to be based upon county zoning ordinances and state regulations, and that straying beyond that is not only not supported by the rule of law, but also you begin to infringe on the abilities of private landowners to be able to develop the land that they have. So the rules and regs that we have in place are certainly appropriate, but I would caution against going beyond that, as some of the questions earlier had seemed to do. So, Mr. Chairman, thanks for your time and everyone else's.
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Looks like we have Nancy S.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From what I have learned so far, excuse me, I live on South 2nd Street in town. From what I've learned so far, I think this is a positive program. I would like to have you insist that the company that is doing these offer regularly scheduled training to firefighters so that they are prepared, not just bookwork, but actual hands-on classroom or physical on-scene training as to how to keep themselves safe as well as keep their neighbors safe. Thank you.
Good stuff.
Thank you, Ms. Sendler. Mr. Don Jones.
Regular fire safety training for the local.
Mr. Fetch, can you hear me?
Yes.
You need to mute your. You need to mute it. We can hear you. Can you mute your computer? Thank you. Don Jones.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to say thank you to the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. This has been a very thorough meeting, and I am encouraged by the fact that, we're not just taking ConnectGen's word on everything and that some tough questions are being asked, but I would like to voice my support for this project and for the Planning and Zoning Commission to recommend to the County Commission that they approve the permit. I have lived in Laramie my entire life, and as many other young Wyomingites, I am, deeply concerned about the effects of climate change on our state. In my lifetime, I've seen it get hotter and drier, and I think that in the long term, climate change is one of the biggest threats we face. I wish that we were not in the situation we are in now, where developing commercial wind projects was necessary. But I think that, the alternative to continue relying on fossil fuels and not to transition to renewable energy is going to be far more impactful than, constructing the rail tie wind project. I think that there are a number of reasons it makes good sense to go forward with the rail tie where it is. It's in an area that has already been fairly impacted by residential development. So from a wildlife habitat standpoint, I think it's far better to develop wind energy south of Laramie than, up in the Shirley Basin or in other areas that are much more contiguous and less impacted habitat. And I know other people have already mentioned this as well, but the fact that there's already a high voltage line going through this area means that there would be, a lot less new transmission line that would need to be constructed, which would further lessen the environmental impact. And, I'm sympathetic with the concerns of landowners in the area. And, I don't deny that this will have a huge impact on their personal view sheds, but I don't think that that is a good reason for the county commission to not go ahead with this project, which will be beneficial to the vast majority of people in Albany County and in Wyoming and around the world. So thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Brian Carpenter.
Hello. Thank you for giving the opportunity for me to talk a little bit. We are at 45 Corral Springs Road, tie siding, so we are directly adjacent to the project. And my main concern is the setbacks, which it's been mentioned several times, and not just the ice throw, but setbacks from adjacent neighbors. And what I'm concerned about is whether the setbacks from the edges of the project are appropriate given the maybe unprecedented height of the proposed units that are going in. Has that been taken into account so that the setbacks can be somewhat proportional, given that these are 1/9 of a mile high? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I believe it's 1.1
Times the height.
times the height, but from residents, Mr. Carpenter, I think it's 5.5 times. Is that correct? I think it's 5.5 times from any residents.
Yeah.
So times the height of the tower. So
I'm
just
more thinking of visual impact though, because that
Sure.
kind of, I would think, ought to be taken into account.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments and thank you for your time.
All right.
Mr. John Davis.
Here, can you see me or hear me?
We can see you. Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name's John Davis, and my wife and I own a house at 244 Elk Crossing Road in tie siding, which the viewscape is directly into this project, and that's why we're concerned. But those concerns are probably axiomatic. I want to thank the commission here, because I understand you're all volunteers and you're not getting paid to listen to all of us. And to the extent that we can collectively come to a better decision, that's why we all do what we're doing here. My bona fides, my standing for calling you is that we got our property tax statement from Grant Shoaker, the assessor, and the value of our property went down $157,000 last year. And that's astonishing to me because interest rates are near zero. And with the COVID epidemic, people were looking for sanctuary properties, but our place actually went down. And Grant can't tell us why. He can't blame it on the wind farm. But I would submit to you that there's no other explanation. And Bill and Linda Biles, our neighbor, their property went down as well. So when the county staff is looking at the site plan and kind of going through their checklist saying, well, there's no adverse effect, there's no health and safety concern, there's no overburden, there's no general nuisance. Well, I would say horse pucky to that, because we have demonstrable from the county economic damages that are attributable to the anticipation of this project. So we bought into a platted subdivision. It had covenants and restrictions, and you would think that the county approved that subdivision knowing what the rest of the county around it would be. But instead, we find ourselves $157,000 upside down, and that just does not seem fair. So how many people bought property in Wyoming that went down last year? Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Davis. I appreciate it. Mr. Showaker. Mr. Showaker, we can't hear you. Mr. Showaker, can you hear it? We can't hear you. I'll move on to the next one and we'll come back to Mr. Showaker. Jennifer Kirchhoffer.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, this is Paul Montoya. I don't know why I'm showing up as Jennifer Kirchhoffer. I know her, she's a neighbor, but I am representing Albany County for Smart Energy Development. Thank you for allowing me to speak to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I agree with Mr. Strumpf and Ms. Nair that I'm excited about wind and solar energy development in Albany County. Unfortunately, this particular project is ill-suited and poorly sited. It's the only project that we have in Albany County that has 183 residents and subdivisions directly adjacent to the project. So it's one that is not very well planned. And whereas I encourage a lot of the other sites, I don't think this one is well sited. And I'm looking forward to the environmental committee, the city county committee, to look at a lot of these things as far as siting. The only issue I'd like to address would be the ADLS lighting system. I want to be very clear that I think this is something that the Planning and Zoning Commission, it's been brought up by a couple of the commissioners, and I think it's really worth looking at because the new regulations actually say that the Board of County Commissioners shall, not may, require installation and maintenance of an aircraft detection lighting system, ADLS, in order to mitigate light impacts to nearby residential areas. I don't think that anyone proposing a project should be able to say, well, we're going to apply, but if we don't get it, you know, you're kind of out of luck if you live in the area because you're going to have to put up with lights 24/7, or at least at night. The other thing that needs to be brought out is I am very familiar with the FAA regulations on ADLS, and the perimeter that Ms. McDonald brought up, she didn't specify what that perimeter for detecting aircraft is, but it is quite extensive, and aircraft that aren't even directly adjacent to the area will set off this radar detection system. The other thing that she did fail to mention is that the FAA requirement requires that the lights remain on for 30 minutes after the aircraft has left the area. So we're talking about some large impacts as far as lighting in this area. And this not only affects the residents, but it also affects UW Observatory that is adjacent to this project. So I do think Planning and Zoning Commission should reject this application until these concerns are mediated. So that's all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Montoya. I appreciate your
Hi,
comment.
this is Grant. Can you hear me now?
Grant, we can go ahead.
Yes, there we go. Good. I fixed the technical difficulties. Okay, I've been following the property valuations because of the situation of this very carefully. I have talked to Mr. Davis regarding these situations. Starting up at Vista Grand, working our way south through the Buttes and Harney Creek, horseshoeing our way all the way up by Ames Monument, we have over 15 sales that show absolutely no value decrease at this point. Now, that's not to say what's going to happen in the future, but we do have 15 sales that are showing us that at this particular point, valuation is not being affected by the possibility of these properties being built and ruining the view. So in that particular case, we are actually showing that there's a stabilization. Now, where Mr. Davis's properties are, there were a few properties that sold in 19 and 20, all of them showing a reduction issue. And there was a couple of situations that do take into consideration away from the wind farm. One of them is the 2019 sale. Really, it was not general knowledge that the wind farms were going to be coming at that particular point. And yet it suffered the same situation of the couple of sales that happened during 2020. Another situation regarding those is all those properties were up for sale for multiple years. This puts a scenario in there where it leaves into question what that particular area has done. Now, because of the obvious value reductions, I had to take care of that in as far as my job is concerned by state law. But due to the fact that with the 2019 sales, the long term that these properties were up for sale, it leaves into question as to exactly why the reduction is what it is. I cannot say whether it is or isn't the wind farm, but there is enough evidence to put into question that that was the absolute reason. So, and we do have maps at our office that show the location of the sales in relation to the perimeter of the wind farm property. So if anybody wants to stop by, we'd love to have them stop by. We'll show you the maps and give you information about the property. So we are keeping a very close eye on this, but at this particular point, we are not seeing any definitive information that tells us that the wind farm at this particular point is causing value property decreases. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Showaker. Thanks for your insight. We do appreciate that. Terry Kamen.
I think I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me, please?
We sure can. Go right ahead.
Yes, this is Terry Kamen. We own roughly 4,700 acres in the wind project. It's on 52 Williams Reservoir Road. We did sign a contract with Connect Gen some time ago. I feel like I've been in 100 of these meetings, but I'm here to express my support of the project. In general, of course, I mean, when Martha Vineyards okays the federal project of 800 megawatts this week, I think it tells you that even the most healed people against wind are supportive of this. The other thing is I hear a lot about light pollution, but from our ranch, we can see Interstate 80 very clearly at night. A lot of trucks, a lot of overhead lights. And so I'm not sure where the big beef is coming. And I think in short is this thing has been studied and restudied. I think the Planning and Zoning Commission and all the people and the staff that have worked on this, you've explored every avenue. If you want the project, then I think we vote for it. And if you don't want it, then I think we walk away from it. But it's time to either blank or get off the pot. So that's all I have. I hope you approve the project. I think it will be good for the state, the county, and the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamen. Up next is Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edwards, I know you represent a group, and I'm willing to give you more time just because I think that you've been hired by a group of people, and instead of listening to them individually, we'll listen to you. So, Mr. Edwards, I'll give you 8 minutes, 8 to 10, somewhere, keep in that ballpark. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mitch Edwards with Nicholas and Tangeman. And as Mr. Moore indicated, we represent over 60, close to 70 landowners who are negatively impacted by this particular project and in opposition. I want to address a couple things here for you this evening, and I appreciate your willingness to go long into the night here as we deal with this. But this is a matter of great public importance. And as we've been discussing here tonight, what I've noticed is an absence of, for the most part, with the exception of a few folks, of an application of the facts and the information in the application to the regulations and to the required findings that this commission and ultimately the Board of Commissioners is required to make in order to approve such a project. And I know that while I'm being given more time, the issues here are quite expansive. And just if you look at the regulations themselves, there's 8 categories of findings that are required to be made. And within those categories, there are numerous subcategories. And we could spend 3 minutes or 8 minutes or half an hour on any one of those given categories, whether it's fire suppression, whether it's ADLS lighting, whether it's cultural resources, and so forth. One of the things that I've noticed here is that there's really a lot of dancing going around about some of the questions that were asked. And I just want to point one of those out, and that was fire suppression. And there was never really a clear answer as to whether or not it's something that's available and whether or not it can be implemented. But I just looked at the Vestas website and their brochure for their 4 megawatt platforms. And they have a list in that brochure of options that are available for their 4 megawatt platforms, and listed quite boldly in that is fire suppression option. And so it's kind of interesting to me that the applicant here is providing that they're intending to use this particular turbine and nacelle, and they're reluctant to talk about the fire suppression that is available through that manufacturer. The manufacturer also has shadow detection. They have de-icing systems and various different things that can help, as it says, for the safety and suitability of the turbines and enhance their performance and adaptability to the project. And those are things that we should be looking at as a community in order to mitigate these impacts. And that's what you as a board are required to look at, is what are the impacts and how are they proposing to mitigate those impacts? And you have to make a determination whether or not those impacts are being properly mitigated. The problem I see with the recommendation from your staff and with the application itself is that it leaves not only flexibility, which in the world of law results in a lack of enforceability. And I deal with a lot of permits for various different entities, and it's very hard to enforce a permit standard if the standard is very loosey-goosey. And so you as the county have the obligation to write the permit and the standards and the mitigation impacts such that they can be enforced with the level of certainty for this community. The problem is that none of these mitigation efforts are actually being defined. They're being provided in the report as, well, they're going to enter into an agreement at some point in the future regarding roads. They're going to enter into an agreement or try to confer with the FAA about the lighting impacts. They're going to reach out and try to get other road agreements or permits from the state or the federal government relating to access points. They don't even have a lease here, and they say, well, we're going to get that lease, but we don't know that with certainty. And what we have is the cart ahead of the horse with respect to that particular lease. But the other lease that's in play here is the state of Wyoming lease, which is a substantial part of this project. That particular lease is currently under judicial review and is subject to being overturned by the courts. And so we don't know a lot of things about this project. And when you look at the project application is very loosey-goosey. And one of the commissioners pointed out that they talk about 3 different potential turbines that they might use in their studies and various different things. Well, what we learned from the Roundhouse project is that the county was having a hard time enforcing anything with respect to their requirements because the permit didn't say that we couldn't do that. And so they would do it. And it was from things with respect to speed limits, to dust suppression, to shadow flicker, and all those things that we're talking about that are negative impacts. from this project that we need to define, and you need to define as a commission, what are those mitigations, and we need to pinpoint what those requirements are going to be in order to define whether or not the project is properly mitigating those impacts. To say what we're just going to push it off and do a cultural resource study later doesn't tell us how the cultural resources are being mitigated. It just says that, hey, we're going to study it, and when we come up with a study, we'll figure it out later. And by then it's too late, because by then they're already well into the project and they're building it. What are you going to tell them? No, tear it down. And that's what they're hoping for, is this loosey-goosey flexibility that you cannot enforce a permit so that they can go off and either do whatever they want, or they can convey it to somebody else in the future. And your job as a commission is to make findings that they are specifically mitigating those impacts. And until you know what those impacts are specifically for that particular turbine that they're going to use, and you tie them to that turbine, and you know specifically what those mitigations are going to be, you cannot make a finding that they are sufficiently mitigating any of those impacts. All you're doing is leaving open questions. And that is the problem with a recommendation of approval here, is that apparently we're going to recommend approval, but there's all these things that need to happen, that they need to get, that they need to do, whether it's the ADLS lighting and finding out whether they can get approval for that or not. And how do you know if they've mitigated the impacts if you don't know what the result of that application is going to be? Because that would significantly impact your decision with respect to whether or not lighting is being mitigated, if they are able or unable or unwilling to provide those types of protection lighting systems that would mitigate those impacts. And so until you have that, I think you are putting the cart ahead of the horse to say that you can recommend this for approval on those particular issues and those particular conditions that you're required to find. And when we have one specific thing here for certain where they haven't met the requirement, I don't know why it is the commission continues to say, well, we'll just make this approval subject to them doing something in the future. No, any other application that we deal with in time, you should have your ducks in order, and you should have all of the elements checked off before you come in and submit your application, so that you can move forward and you can recommend approval because they've met all those boxes. Not saying, well, we'll provide this at a later date. And so with that, I ask that you recommend that this be denied based on what the information is that you currently have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. I appreciate that. Appreciate your comments and your insight. Mr. Richard Dow.
Thank you. My name is Richard Dow. I live at 169 Butte Loop, and I oppose this project. I urge you to vote against it. But if you do approve it, I urge you to require as mandatory a number of mitigation measures that have been discussed. I am particularly concerned about the lighting and the aircraft detection system. The Roundhouse project over in Laramie County, the lights seem to be on all the time, even though they supposedly have this system. So what assurance do we have that even if they install it, it will actually be active? I'm concerned about fire and ice throw. And some people have mentioned that things would drop vertically. And where I live, the wind is usually blowing and nothing drops quite vertically. From a great height of perhaps 400 or 500 feet, I would think the wind might deflect the downward motion of falling objects a considerable distance. Therefore, I think the 1.5 setback is much more appropriate than the 1.1 setback. I am also concerned about eagles in particular, birds in general. There is a state-of-the-art system called Identiflight that will reduce the death of eagles. Things like this should be mandatory. And I'm also very concerned about the highway safety on US 287 during construction. And I have read the road reports of the applications, and I have not been convinced that there's been an adequate study of the danger to traffic on Highway 287 during construction. There will be perhaps 10 large trucks each day causing traffic backups and all that, people passing where they shouldn't. And I fear that there will be extra collisions. And I think this issue should be analyzed more. Anyway, please don't let them build this project on the cheap. And thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Dow. Kelly Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm here tonight to ask you to please support this project and recommend that the county commissioners approve the rail tie application permit. I would disagree with, I believe it was Mr. Montoya earlier who said that this project is improperly cited because of the development around it. I think that that is precisely why it is properly cited, as explained by, I think, at least one previous speaker, in that there is plenty of development already in the area with roads, houses, etc. And furthermore, that there is a high voltage transmission line running through the area, making this an ideal location for a project of this size and scale. I once counted myself among the several thousands of young people who flee this state every year in search of better opportunity. And I did that precisely because Laramie felt stagnant. And I think that since moving back to Laramie about a year ago, this is by far the most exciting thing that this area has been considering in a long time. And it gives me hope that Albany County and the state of Wyoming can be a place where young people would like to stay and make a future. And I think that projects like these are crucial to both funding public services, providing jobs, and just overall demonstrating that Wyoming and Albany County is not a place that is resistant to change. So thank you all for being here this late. That's all from me.
Thank you, Ms. Schroeder. We appreciate your comments. Natalie Johnson, or Natalia Johnson? Natalia Johnson?
Hi there, can you hear us?
We can hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'm going to have my son speak. He's been listening to all of these meetings. He's been very engaged. All of my children have been. They are the future of our county, our country, our entire world. So I'd like to introduce my son, Tavish.
My name is Tavish. I'm 11 years old. I live off Pumpkin Vine Road and I'm angry. My future is not being taken seriously. I will not be able to ride my bike on Pumpkin Vine Road. I won't be able to walk or hunt on the state land. I'm upset that our county is so vulnerable with horribly inadequate industrial regulations. It's almost too insane to imagine what my future actually looks like. Don't let big wind regulate Albany County. My future depends on it. By the way, this is Connect Gen's first rodeo. No, they've never done this before. No, I don't trust Connect Gen or this loosey-goosey application. I trust this commission to protect me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Mr. Epler, Rhett Epler.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We sure can. Go right ahead, Mr. Epler.
Great. I'm sorry, I'm outside. Let me get away from the train. I just want to say that I support this project. I think it's good for the county. I want to laud the commissioners, the planners for doing such a good, thorough job in vetting this and looking through it. I believe that, sorry, somebody just sped by. I believe that this is a good project. You guys have done a great job in looking over the information everybody sent. And I don't think at this point, anybody can say they have not been heard or feel like their point is, been taken seriously. This has been going on for a year and a half, and I just urge you guys to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Epler. I think we lost you anyways. Diane Brewer.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. I live at Tie Siding. We will be negatively impacted by this project. I certainly understand the comments and the excitement of people who want to promote wind energy. fair enough. I guess if we're going to be on the cutting edge and we want to promote it, I am wondering why no one has looked at the Vortex bladeless turbines. Why is that not being considered? It seems like it would mitigate a lot of concerns, from ice throw to blade disposal, which no one has brought that up this evening, to the loss of animals, to shadow flicker, to setbacks. I guess that's my question. And I appreciate all the effort and comments and attention this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rook. Thank you for your comments. Janet Webster.
Stuart Webster, Janet husband. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go right ahead.
I would like to reiterate some previous comments about traffic safety on Highway 287. We've lived here at the Buttes for 25 plus years, and everybody who lives here can cite numerous examples of near accidents at our entry. I can only imagine what the presence of 300 and plus windmill blades will do to the highway traffic on 287. I would also like to express concern about some issues that were expressed about 4 hours ago earlier in this meeting about the water aquifer. Nobody has addressed the question of how much impact on the Casper aquifer will be had by the digging for each of the wind generators that's going to occur, and the impact on all of us who are reliant on our wells is just too much to consider. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Ann Baran.
Hello, I'm reaching out to you tonight as the executive director of the Albany County Conservancy. Many of you know me as the owner, fourth generation owner of Ledwig Photography, but during COVID, I started a nonprofit focused on ecology and focused on the wildlife and history of Albany County. And many of my supporters, hundreds of them, are extremely concerned about the health and safety of this project first. Being a mother first, I'm pro-renewable, but I have to say that this site is wrongly cited. And I want to know why we're not having these discussions about the other sites. And I want to note that the other wind sites, we have 2 other wind projects approved already, and we have another one that was mentioned in my Boomerang paper last week, Rock Creek. And we're not having the public weigh in on those projects. And I think there's a real reason for that. And as a citizen of Laramie, I am greatly concerned about my safety on Highway 287, which I drive all the time. And I'm also concerned as a business owner because I make my living on that view shed. And I'm not ashamed to say it. Local families want their portraits at Vitavue. I'm up there 2 to 3 times a week, and they don't want turbines. And I am really disappointed that I have attended planning meeting after planning meeting. My first planning meeting attended was last March, or maybe even before that, before COVID hit. And there were those of us who asked for a moratorium. And I wonder why the planners didn't listen. And I want to know why the commissioners didn't listen to the public. Hundreds of people have spoken out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brand, for your comments. Seeing that we've gotten through everybody who's raised their hand, I'm going to go ahead and close this to public comment at this time. So at this point, is there any comments from any of the commission members? Mr. Hinckley?
No, when we get to taking a vote, I've got a few amendments I'd like to offer, but we can wait till that point.
Okay, Mr. Hinckley. Ms. Hanning?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if Luke Hawkins is still on right now, if I can ask a fire prevention question of him.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Thanks. I'm just wondering the trade-off in making a fire break around the project or protecting lands uphill and more wooded. A fire break is going to make a lot of destruction at the same time, but would a fire break provide any element of mitigation here?
Sure. I mean, fire breaks always prevent or give some mitigation. Of course, that's always weather dependent. Wind is going to play a huge factor in that. And there are recommendations, like I said before, from NFPA 850. They give a standard recommendation. I don't know the numbers offhand. I couldn't recite those to you, but there are numbers of standards that can be looked at and followed. And I believe that Amanda has addressed some of those already, but I'm looking forward to working with her in the future in terms of making sure that they've done all that they can. There's fire breaks, there's standpipes, there's all kinds of internal fire suppression systems that can be addressed and done. To my knowledge, they're not required. They are still just a standard, but they can be looked up and researched and addressed, and I'm happy to do so, whatever's the best for the community.
Thank you for your response.
Yeah.
I don't have any further questions right now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Hanning. And thank you, Luke, for your comments. Mr. Spiegelberg, do you have any comments or discussion at this point?
I would just say that it's been a very difficult decision. This has gone on and gone on and gone on. And it's been a very difficult issue. And I can see both sides of it. It's been a very difficult process for everyone involved, but I think we've been very thorough about it, very thorough.
Thank you, Mr. Spiegelberg. Mr. Kennedy?
I would just echo Mr. Spiegelberg on that. And I realize for the two members that are newer, we've probably put in at least 10 meeting hours before this, and I don't know how many 100 hours I'd want to say on reading all the comments that we've got in from last spring until now. So with that, I'm ready to get to going here.
Okay. And I too would echo those comments. I think that a lot of thought has gone into this. It's been a very, very tough. It's been very tough, and it's taken up a lot of time, and I just think it's been very, very tough, and I think that everybody on this commission, and I do appreciate the hard work that Ms. Hanning and Mr. Hinckley have put in, because they're getting thrown in the middle of this, and that's why I also allowed more time and questions for you guys, because I think that it is good, and I think that you guys were very well researched, and I do think that you have done a good job, and you guys have jumped in and or been thrust into this position. So I do applaud you guys. At this point, we're going to have a comment. I think that all the commission members have all their answers, any questions that they had answered. I guess I could pose it. Mr. Hinckley or Ms. Hanning or Mr. Spiegelberg or Mr. King, do you have any questions for Mr. Gertsch?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and we'll just call for a vote then.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend approval of the Rail Tie Wind Project application WECS 0221 to the Board of County Commissioners, incorporating the findings of fact and conclusions of laws listed in the staff report.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table from Commissioner Kennedy.
I would so second.
Okay, we have a second from Mr. Spiegelberg. Discussion, I know Mr. Hinckley raised the question of bringing up some amendments. I think that it'd be appropriate this time to hear those amendments from Mr. Hinckley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the for the attaboy. I don't know how Mara feels about it, but I feel like I could have spent another month trying to get up to speed on this. So I appreciate all the work that you guys have done getting to this point and giving us opportunity to try to catch up. I approve the project. I'm in favor of the motion on the floor. I would like to offer 3 amendments to it by way of additional conditions that I think would be appropriate. Do you want to do those one by one or as a group? What's your pleasure, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Hinckley, let's go through one by one, and we can kind of get a consensus on how everybody feels. And we can also vote on what we think as far as the amendments, knowing that the motion that's on the floor is a recommendation for approval. So go ahead and start with the first one.
I think that's the appropriate procedures. We can vote each amendment, and then once we've exhausted amendments, we'll get back to the main motion. The first thing is I would like to amend the approval to include the condition that there be adoption of ADLS tower lighting devices. It is, as was remarked by somebody, actually required by our regulations. So, well, I'm sorry, I should let somebody second that before I launch into discussion, if it has a second.
I think that in Ms. Curran, you can hop in here and interject. As far as the ADLS lighting.
Well, is there a second for my motion? Not just for procedurally.
So do we have a second to hear about the, do we have a second from anybody on the commission?
Ganning will second.
Okay, so we have a first and a second for the condition of adoption of the LD8. And so as far as the discussion, and Ms. Curran, you can jump in here. As far as the regulations that we had been working through for the last several months, we are very much for, and before Mr. Hinckley and Ms. Hanning joined the commission, we were very much for a requirement of the ADLS lighting. We were told that it, we can recommend it. It shall, I can't remember the exact wording, but I think we want it, but ultimately the FAA is the end definer on those ADLS lighting. Is that correct? Or what did we put into the regulations we sent to the Board of County Commissioners?
The regulations state, quote, the Board of County Commissioners shall require installation and maintenance of an aircraft detection lighting system, ADLS, in order to mitigate light impacts to nearby residential areas. I believe I downloaded the very latest of those.
Okay, and those are the regulations that the Board of County Commissioners have not approved yet. Is that correct?
Chairman, no, these were approved March 2, 2021, according to my notes. Is that correct, Jennifer?
Chairman Moore, I think, and David can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it says shall require installation and maintenance of an aircraft detection lighting systems, the ADLS, in order to mitigate light impacts to nearby residential areas if approved by the FAA. And I think we settled on that language because if the FAA doesn't approve that lighting, I don't believe it can be placed on those towers because the FAA is who regulates that lighting.
Okay, no, thank you for that clarification. And based on our existing regulations, I will withdraw that amendment.
Okay, very good. Now on to number 2, Mr. Hinckley.
Thank you. The amendment would be that the approval be conditioned upon adherence to a shadow flicker standard of no more than 10 minutes duration for an individual event. Is there a second?
Is there a second on that?
I'll second for discussion, hand in seconds.
Okay, very good. So we have a duration of no longer than 10 minutes, correct? For
Yes,
any shadow
yes.
flicker, is that correct? Okay, so
Yes.
that's number
So
one.
to present my amendment, I think like most of the commissioners, we've spent a lot of time agonizing over what's regulatable and what isn't. And there's no question that this project will be a huge impact on the landscape. I don't doubt for a minute that if it goes forward, there will at some point be a turnout for the tourists to come and see this engineering marvel. There will be those who would see this as kinetic art. Others would see it as an abomination. So I'm just struggling as a Wyoming native of many generations. I kind of lean towards the latter, but here we are in the 21st century. So I've tried to figure out where is it that we draw that line of imposing on the neighbor's property. What they see out their window, I don't feel like we can regulate it to that degree. But the thought of somebody waving a sheet in front of the sun outside my window and causing a flicker through my house, to me, that does cross the line into that is an impact on the neighbors, an imposition on the neighbor's situation that can and should be regulated under the general nuisance provisions of the regulations. What the right number is, I don't know. I compliment Ms. McDonald for sharing with us that it's not difficult to regulate those turbines for those specific times. So that's the substance of my amendment, is that I think it is one small thing that we can do to honestly mitigate the impact of this project on neighboring properties. That's the substance of my intention here.
Thank you, Mr. Hinckley. Ms. Hanning, do you have anything to add to that, or any questions about the shadow flicker?
I guess I would like to ask Member Hinckley about the motion. So do you see achieving the 10-minute goal not through additional setback distances, but instead programmed turnoff of the turbines for some portion of the year when the flicker would go beyond 10 minutes? Are you talking about like an automated solution for turning off turbines?
Well, I would leave that up to the folks that are running those things, but turbine flicker is fundamentally pure geometry. We can tell you what the flicker of a turbine would be at any point in time for the next 100 years right now. So as Ms. McDonald pointed out correctly, the numbers that they provided us, that the maximum duration of the current modeling would be just short of 30 minutes. If it's cloudy, then that has no impact. And of course, you don't get any flicker at night. So no, my notion would be, and I don't know the technology, but I was reassured by the honest answers that we got from ConnectGen that the turbines can be modulated on fairly short notice. So there is a very small income loss to the proponent to modulate those turbines. And if you were willing to do that during cloudy conditions, like I say, you can program that right now for the next 100 years. If there are ways to be more subtle about that and adjust your shadow flicker based on the orientation of the blades with respect to the sun, or if it's cloudy, then that's fine. But I think there could be a standard that says you don't get to make the sun go blinkety, 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 blink through my window for more than 10 minutes at a time.
Thanks for explaining that.
Mr. Spiegelberg, do you have any thoughts on the shadow flicker amendment that Mr. Hinckley proposed?
No, I don't, but I don't think that there's shadows, but I don't think there's that many roads going to be affected by this. It's a little different. I've driven in shadow areas up by Arlington, and they are real, but the majority of these turbines and stuff are going to be quite isolated, with few exceptions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Spiegelberg. Mr. Kennedy?
I would ditto that. I've Arlington, even at the point when it was in construction, and
And it's noticeable but not obtrusive, and some of this is simply, as Bern said, simply geometry. And the fact of the matter is, it may only be one or two towers that bother at a certain time of the year. This isn't a 30 minutes every day ordeal. We do notice occasionally the sun moves a little north and south through the year.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And to the amendment, I really don't have anything to add. I think all commissioners had really good points. I'd like to just ask a professional question of Ms. McDonald from ConnectGen. Can you expand on that a little bit, Ms. McDonald? Or would you be willing to?
Yeah, for sure. So I can talk a little bit on the standard we've been using, which is 30 hours per year of shadow flicker at occupied residences. And some background on why we use that standard is that's what's recommended by the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissions. Albany County does not currently regulate shadow flicker in its regulations, but other counties that do tend to use this 30-hour per year limit. For example, Sweetwater County, Wyoming, which is, by far has the strictest wind regulations in Wyoming. They use this standard of 30 hours per year for shadow flicker. So that's where we're coming from with that standard. This isn't something that we have invented ourselves. I do have some concerns with, a standard that is a little bit more arbitrary. But ultimately, of course, it's up to this board's discretion.
Well, Mr. Gone, thank you for that insight. Let's see. With that being said, let's go ahead and take a vote on this amendment that Mr. Hinckley had made a motion for, in making this a condition to the motion that we have on the floor right now for approval. Mr. Hinckley?
Yes. Aye.
Ms. Hanning?
Aye.
Mr. Spiegelberg?
No.
Mr. Kennedy?
No.
And Chairman Moore, myself, no. And so the amendment for condition number 2 that Mr. Hinckley brought up fails. Mr. Hinckley, could you tell us about item number 3?
Yeah, the third one also addresses a lot of the commentary that we've heard and is based on the information that we've learned over the course of the hearing. And that would be, and again, I should state the amendment in a second before I discuss it. Let me do that. The amendment would be installation of fire suppression systems as part of nacelle design and construction.
Okay, very good. Any discussion, Ms. Hanning?
I need a second first.
Oh, excuse me. I apologize, Mr. Hinckley. It's almost 10 o'clock.
There you go. No, this is
I apologize. Do we have a second?
Hanning will second.
Okay, very good. Okay, so discussion. We have a motion on the floor for this third condition that Mr. Hinckley has proposed about the fire suppression. Ms. Hanning, do you have any comments, questions? Do we need to ask a professional? What would you like to do?
Well, I guess that we could ask Ms. McDonald again to describe the ability to get this technology. It sounds like if it's being manufactured, then it's a best management practice that we should be requiring out of course, especially with our arid environment, strong winds, and wildfire potential is strong here. So I just think that if these things exist in the technology world, we should be requiring. But if Ms. McDonald wants to comment at all on her thoughts about that, that'd be great.
So Ms. Hanning, that sounds really good. Let me ask Mr. Kennedy, do you have any comments or anything on the fire suppression system?
My only comment would be, and people need to realize that I was a firefighter, fire chief, and a fire instructor for about 18 years. And my concern is that these extinguishment materials are hazardous materials in and of themselves. And while fire is a possibility there, even without wind towers, and I'm opposed based on the fact that I don't know how they're mitigated and maintained over time. And the other thing is, for 30 years, we've taught defensible space around residents. And that's one thing that I'm pretty on top of with our own location. And prairie fires are a reality whether or not there's wind towers. So this, it makes economic sense for the developer, they'll go ahead and do it, because no doubt they're going to insure products, and the rates they're going to pay are going to be based on the likelihood of an accident happening. So I think this is something that can be left to them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Spiegelberg, do you have any comments on the fire suppression of the turbines? No comment. Okay. Ms. McDonald, would you be willing to maybe give a little insight to us about your company and what your availability is for it, and what Mr. Hinckley's amendment to that, if you have a little background on that, or anybody part of your team?
Sure, I can address that. Yes, this turbine fire suppression technology does exist. Something we would be open to looking at. As Mr. Hankins with the Albany County Fire District noted, we are working with him on fire safety for this project, and absolutely would be open to exploring turbine fire suppression systems with him if that's something that the local fire departments believe is necessary for this project.
Mr. Hinckley, do you have a direct question for Mrs. McDonald?
No. I think that's she has answered well, and the substance of the answer was that they would work with Mr. Hawkins, which I was quite impressed with his testimony as well. The statement, however, was not on point with respect to the offered amendment, which is that we would make that a requirement. And if people felt more comfortable, say best technology, but I think we've learned over the course of the evening that the technology is available. I just feel like we ought to do what we can to make this the model wind farm going forward. This certainly won't be the last, and if there are things we can do to make this make it usefully less impactful to the environment and the neighbors, then I think we should do so. So the substance of all three of my amendments were to produce a better product at the end. It is certainly not my intention to scuttle the project.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hinckley. So we will take a vote. We have a first and a second on the third condition of the amendment that was proposed by Mr. Hinckley. And we'll go ahead and take a vote. Mr. Hinckley.
Aye.
Ms. Hanning.
Aye.
Mr. Spiegelberg.
No.
Mr. Kennedy.
No.
And Chairman Moore, myself, no. So the third condition doesn't pass. So what we have on the table right now is a motion to approve the application. Are there any other amendments that any other member would like to put forth?
Mr. Chairman, I would call the question.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call a vote. This is for the motion to approve this application for recommended application to the Board of County Commissioners. Mr. Hinckley.
Aye.
Ms. Hanning.
Aye.
Mr. Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore, myself, aye. Motion carries 5-0. The application will be submitted to the Board of County Commissioners. Everybody who commented on it, for or against, will also have an opportunity to visit with the Board of County Commissioners. And we do appreciate everybody's comments. And we're going to move forward. One more thing that I could just add on this is I did tell Mr. RJ Fetch that he did have 3 questions. And Mr. Gertsch, are you available?
I am available.
Would you work with Ms. McDonald, and would you find out the answers to the 3 questions that he had asked earlier in this meeting? The first one was, will this have any effect on cell phone coverage? Second, he asked the question of what is the effect on his views of the Milky Way, the light pollution. So I think that that's probably going to be addressed with the ADLS lighting. And then 3, the effect on birds. And I guess if you'd be so kind to maybe write something up or have something with Ms. McDonald on what their, what information they have on that, and find out how we can answer those questions for Mr. Fetch. And I'd really appreciate that.
Sure.
So at this point here, our meeting is concluded with, yes.
Sorry. Well, I just grant me one small privilege here, just for the benefit of the attending audience here. We did not spend much time on wildlife cultural resources or decommissioning. Albany County is specifically preempted on those, but everyone involved, if they aren't fully aware of it, should be made aware that the Industrial Siting Council has a procedure going forward, as does the EIS through the federal WAPA permission. So there are lots more opportunities out there to modulate this project, and everyone should not be the least bit shy about participating in those other forums. This was a limited forum based on the county regulations, but is not the whole story. And I would like to extend my thanks to everybody who showed up for this long and arduous meeting, and for their commitment to our community. And I think we all share that commitment. So thank you for the opportunity to say that, Mr. Chair.
Your kind words, Mr. Hinckley. Let's see, before we move on here, we have just a couple of things that we have to finish before we end this meeting. Ms. Kern, being that you're our civil attorney, is there anything else that needs to be brought up, or that you heard that maybe could make just insight or something you could add for us?
Thank you, Chairman Moore. I don't think that there's anything I need to add with what was heard tonight. I just wanted to make this board and the members of the public who are on the phone aware that the county commissioner's public hearing on the rail tie project that was set for 9:30 a.m. on June 1st is still being set for June 1st, but it's going to begin at 6 p.m. And the location will be announced. It's likely to be in the district courtroom if they can work out the technology. But I just wanted to make everybody aware that that time frame has changed, and we will get that publicized as well.
Thank you, Ms. Kern. I appreciate that announcement.
Thank you.
Mr. Gertsch, current planning projects? Looks like we have none.
Correct. There's none.
Okay, very good. Other items and announcements. The next meeting that we'll have will be 2021 at 4 p.m. And at this time, I think that probably we'll just keep it on Zoom for now, and kind of monitor the situation with the COVID regulations. I know things are opening up, but I also think that that's an important time that you also need to be careful. I would really like us to actually get back together, and it'd be good to have Mr. Hinckley and Ms. Hanning up there in the county commissioner room with us, and be able to be face to face and have some discussion. I think that it's a little bit easier to have discussion when you're with people and in person. But I also think that health and safety is very important, not only of our members, but of the people who have to come to these meetings that work for the county. And they're required to go. And so next meeting will be on Zoom. And then at this point, any other citizen comment on non-agenda related topics. And I'll give a few seconds here for anybody to raise their hand on anything we didn't discuss tonight. Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and close that. I'll need the next order of business is adjourn the regular meeting. And I'll need a motion from a member to adjourn this meeting.
Kennedy, so moved.
Kennedy has a first. We have a second.
Second.
Second from Mr. Spiegelberg. I'll go ahead and call roll. Mr. Hinckley.
Aye.
Ms. Hanning.
Aye.
Mr. Spiegelberg.
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Chairman Moore, myself, aye. Meeting is adjourned. We'll see you guys next month. Is Zoom tonight. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
11:55. Hasta luego. See you guys.